Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: the assassination of Charlie Kirk raises alarm over free speech in America. Kirk often warned about communist ideology. What did he say about the Chinese Communist Party?
The Chinese Communist Party is the biggest enemy of America, period. Hard stop. I'm focused on Xi Jinping's reign of terror, not Vladimir Putin's at all.
And what's behind the raid of a South Korean factory in Georgia, and how could it impact U.S.-South Korean relations? An expert weighs in.
This is a message that President Trump is sending in the context of the South Korean raids and the South Korean totalitarian things that are approaching totalitarianism that are increasingly happening in South Korea under the present administration.
North Korean leader Kim Jong Un appears to have chosen his successor, his daughter Kim Jong Un. South Korean lawmakers said she accompanied him on a recent visit to China. Before we dive into today's news, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter using the link down below. In tomorrow's newsletter, we're taking a closer look at China's expanding naval presence in the South China Sea and the response from Western nations. It drops Friday morning right into your inbox. Don't miss it. The nation is reacting to the shocking news of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Kirk was the founder and president of Turning Point USA and a prominent conservative voice among America's youth. Kirk was widely known for promoting traditional American values, particularly on college campuses, where he focused on encouraging civic engagement and free speech. Many see this assassination as not only targeting Kirk, but also targeting the broader principles he stood for, including constitutional rights and freedom of speech. In recent years, Kirk had also warned about the growing influence of the Chinese Communist Party, which he identified as a biggest threat to American society and its way of life. Let's take a closer look at some of his public statements on the CCP.
Many Americans who fled communist countries compare woke culture and cancel culture in America to what they experienced in their home countries. They see it as an example of communism's influence in the U.S. Last September, Charlie Kirk interviewed Xi Van Fleet, a U.S. citizen who escaped China.
Socialism has been here. It's just getting worse and worse. Right now, it is a communist takeover. And I just can't believe. I thought some 36 or 7 years ago when I left China, I thought I left communism behind me. I thought I embraced the freedom, that freedom will always be here. How wrong was I?
Kirk also highlighted three key features of China's communist revolution. He wrote, quote, "The leaders used 3 steps: promise free stuff, take the guns, censor dissenting voices. Sound familiar? Communism is literally knocking at America's door. We must never let it enter," unquote. A clear sign of socialism's growing footprint in America is New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. He supports free public transportation, free child care, and even city-run grocery stores. According to communists, socialism is the first stage on the path to communism. Charlie Kirk highlighted how the Chinese Communist Party identifies and seeks to influence American politicians. In an ex-post, he named 2024 Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz and Congressman Eric Swalwell. He said, quote, "What's with Democrats like Tim Walz and Eric Swalwell having secret love affairs with women directly connected to the Chinese Communist Party," unquote. Eric Swalwell had a relationship with Christine Feng, a suspected Chinese spy who was also known as Feng Feng. Feng had cultivated relationships with California politicians, including Swalwell, whom the Chinese government saw as having promising political futures. Tim Walz was reportedly having a romantic affair with Jenna Wang, the daughter of a high-ranking communist official, during his 1989 teaching stint in China. In another post, Kirk pointed out that Judge Angel Kelly participated in a judicial exchange program with Communist China. Cheap Chinese goods are everywhere, but at what cost? Charlie Kirk cited U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, warning that China now controls key parts of Americans' daily lives.
Everything from the blood pressure medicine we take to what movies we get to watch and everything in between, we will depend on China for it. They have come to dominate the critical mineral industry supplies throughout the world.
Amid ongoing U.S.-China trade tensions, Beijing's rare earth export ban highlights the strategic risk of relying on China for critical materials. China also hoarded medical masks during the COVID-19 pandemic. Kirk pointed to the U.S. Treasury Secretary's comments, crediting Trump's policies for exposing China's true nature.
You might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors.
Charlie Kirk, a close ally of President Trump, played a key role in helping him win the 2024 election. He often shared Trump's view on policy, especially on one of the biggest threats, the Chinese Communist Party flooding America with deadly fentanyl.
We've lost millions of people due to fentanyl. It comes mostly from China, but it comes through Mexico and it comes through Canada.
The Chinese Communist Party sees America as enemy number one. That's not new. It's always been that way. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, Beijing is expanding its influence, even in America's backyard, like Panama. The Panama Canal has long been under the control of a Hong Kong-based company, one heavily influenced by the CCP. Kirk cited the U.S. Secretary of War, warning young Americans about the growing threat.
I want to be very clear. China did not build this canal. China does not operate this canal. And China will not weaponize this canal. Together, we will take back the Panama Canal from China's influence.
In 2022, Charlie Kirk told NTD-TV, Communist China is America's #1 enemy.
The Chinese Communist Party is the biggest enemy of America, period, hard stop. I'm focused on Xi Jinping's reign of terror, not Vladimir Putin's at all.
This year, in a post on X, he said the Trump administration is leading the world in the fight against Communist China. He wrote, quote, "The world was waiting for America to lead against China. They've been ready and willing to unite against the CCP. President Trump is finally bringing that leadership to the world stage. Every move made up until now has been a buildup to focus on China."
Federal agents just made the biggest e-cigarette bust in U.S. history, seizing more than $86 million worth of illegal products. The U.S. FDA and customs officials confiscated about 4.7 million of them in Chicago on Wednesday. According to health officials, nearly all of it came from China. The imports were also mislabeled to sidestep U.S. duties and FDA approval. The FDA has now issued a warning to the 37 firms responsible for these imports. They're under investigation for providing false information at customs. Since the beginning of this year, U.S. Customs has intercepted more than 6 million illegal e-cigarettes with a total value of more than $120 million. South Korean workers in the U.S. are running scared after last week's raid on a plant in Georgia operated by Hyundai and LG. Reuters reports that many employees are rushing home from facilities run by LG Energy Solution.
It's the world's #2 car battery maker and has 7 plants in the U.S., including 4 under construction. The Hyundai raid last week saw 475 people detained, including over 300 Koreans. Many of those held had been sent to the US for construction work or equipment installation. However, that kind of work is not permitted under visa waivers or business traveller visas. One of the sources says workers at LGES plants who are in the US on visa waivers have now been instructed by the firm to go home. The company has reportedly told subcontractors to make contingency plans and hire local workers, concerned that the situation will hamper its operations in the US. LGES wouldn't comment on that, but did say it had told all workers on business trips to the US to head home or remain at their residences. South Korean companies say they have struggled to obtain suitable visas for the workers needed at high-tech plants in the US, and have come to rely on a loose interpretation of visa rules. South Korean media reports say Seoul and Washington will now discuss creating a new visa category to address the problem. However, on Thursday, President Lee Jae-myung said the raid was likely to leave his country's businesses hesitant about investing in the US. Meanwhile, a plane has arrived in Georgia to take home the workers detained in the raid. It's expected to take off on Thursday morning East Coast time. Seoul has asked that its nationals now be allowed to depart quickly and without handcuffs.
For more on the raid and the current state of U.S.-South Korea relations, we bring on Morse Tan. He's the former U.S. Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice and Dean of Liberty University School of Law.
I think it's highly significant to see the context of this news. And the context is that President Trump met with Lee Jae-myung in the White House. And note that he called out in social media the revolution and the coup that has happened in South Korea. And he was saying that we can't do business with that. And so he called that out. And during the meeting, he called out the raids on the churches. He called out the raid on the Osan Air Base. He talked about crazy Jack Smith because there's a crazy special prosecutor in South Korea who is engaging in all sorts of things together with about 120 other prosecutors. This is all something that Lee Jae-myung put into place. And he was, of course, talking about the tariff and the trade deal. The thing is, Lee Jae-myung, he is not an honest person. And so he was putting on a show and lying to President Trump to his face. And Lee Jae-myung is saying, oh, because of this raid in Georgia, that he can't follow through on the investment in the United States like he promised to do. Well, that's just a convenient pretext for him. He was never intending to follow through. He is trying to buy time. He is trying to deceive President Trump. But this is also an indication that President Trump is not deceived. So you are raiding churches, you're raiding the Osan Air Base, and I'll do a raid. There were warnings in advance to people who were involved, who were reportedly subcontractors of Hyundai and LG, and there were warnings in advance. And this is a proper enforcement of U.S. immigration law. President Trump still wants the expertise and the sort of training of U.S. workers that can happen through such collaboration. But this is a message that President Trump is sending in the context of the South Korean raids and the South Korean totalitarian things that are approaching totalitarianism that are increasingly happening in South Korea under the present administration.
The Taiwanese Coast Guard is protecting one of the island's most vulnerable assets in the face of rising China threats, undersea cables. These cables are vital to the island's communications, especially in a possible Chinese invasion.
This Coast Guard vessel is the first line of defense for Taiwan's undersea cables. One of the cables, TP3, made international headlines when a Chinese captain was found guilty of deliberately severing it earlier this year. Taipei says the cables have become the latest target of China's grey zone warfare, a tactic meant to drain Taiwan's resources while falling short of an act of war. Protecting the 24 undersea cables that connect democratic island Taiwan to the domestic and global internet has become a top priority for Coast Guard Captain Wang Zhongqing.
In the past, the Coast Guard's work was mainly maritime law enforcement, rescue missions and marine conservation. But in recent years, escalations in cross-strait relations have brought about grey zone intrusions by the other side. In recent years, there have probably been many flags of convenience lingering in the vicinity of our submarine cables, which also increases the energy we spend on duty.
Last month, Reuters became the first media outlet to join him on one of these patrols. In the waters near TP3, Coast Guard vessels are now conducting 24-hour patrols. An alert system detects vessels that come within a kilometre of TP3 at slow speed, and operators at radar stations work to identify suspicious ships, the Coast Guard said. Wang Zhongqing is Deputy Director of Patrol Area Office 6.
If a freighter passes by or stays anchored above a submarine cable, in fact, the warning system of the submarine cable will trigger the ship's alert system and warn it. So if the ship deliberately stops above the submarine cable, we cannot rule out that there is an intention behind this behavior.
Taiwanese authorities have connected 2 incidents of suspected underwater sabotage with China-linked boats this year. China's Taiwan Affairs Office did not respond to a request for comment. It has previously said that Taiwan was manipulating possible Chinese involvement in the severing of undersea cables and making up accusations before the facts were clear. Beijing views Taiwan as its own territory and claims the strategic waterway. Taipei rejects China's territorial claims.
A gray zone strategy refers to tactics that fall between peace and a full-scale war. For example, Beijing's applying pressure on Taiwan through a mix of military maneuvers, cyber attacks, and economic measures. It's also trying to infiltrate Taiwan through propaganda or information campaigns. China's goal is to take control of Taiwan without actually declaring war. Coming up, 7 Chinese nationals sentenced in South Africa. They were found guilty of trafficking dozens of Africans and exploiting them in a factory. North Korea leader Kim Jong Un appears to have chosen his successor, his daughter Kim Jong Un. South Korean lawmakers said she accompanied him on a recent visit to China. Protests, fire, and the resignation of Nepal's communist prime minister. What happens next? That and more in just a minute here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A South African court has sentenced 7 Chinese nationals to prison. They were convicted of trafficking dozens of Africans and forcing them to work in a factory. NTD's David Lamb reports.
A court in Johannesburg, South Africa, has sentenced 7 Chinese nationals to 20 years in prison.
20 years in prison.
They were convicted of trafficking 91 individuals from Malawi and forcing them to work at a cotton fabric factory in South Africa. The group was convicted in February for crimes committed from 2017 to 2019. Police raided the factory and arrested the defendants in November 2019. Authorities said they found the Malawian victims confined in inhumane conditions with armed guards controlling their movements. The factory had a high wall and razor fence.
But I want to say to our people as well, they must know that we are taking these issues very serious. Government is working every day towards rooting out all these issues.
Prosecutors said the victims were forced to work 11-hour shifts 7 days a week without safety equipment. The South African Department of Labor expressed support for the sentence and urged greater collaboration among government agencies to help end human trafficking. David Lamb, NTD News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong Un appears to have positioned his daughter Kim Jong Un as his likely successor. On Thursday, South Korean lawmakers said she accompanied him on a recent visit to China, citing the country's spy agency.
North Korean leader Kim Jong Un appears to have solidified his daughter Kim Jong-un as his likely successor after she accompanied him on a visit to China, South Korean lawmakers said on Thursday. Jong-un, estimated to be around 13 years old, stayed at the North Korean embassy and avoided the public spotlight during the Beijing visit. But analysis by South Korea's National Intelligence Service shows the purpose of her visit was to complete a narrative to solidify her position as a potential successor. Here is South Korean lawmaker Lee Seong-kyun.
North Korea was seen making every effort to minimize exposure of Kim Jong Un and Kim Jong-un's biometric information. They were staying in the North Korean embassy, and supplies and waste were transported by special aircraft.
Jong-un was first shown to the world in state media photos in 2022, and her public appearances in diplomatic settings have increased from 2023. The unprecedented trip to Beijing saw Kim watch a large-scale military parade with Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Kim also held bilateral meetings with Xi and Putin in a bid to show North Korea was no longer an isolated country and was trying to restore relations. The South Korean intelligence agency believed that economic ties would inevitably expand following the meeting between Xi and Kim. However, it is most likely through unofficial trade, according to the lawmakers.
A communist-controlled Asian country is going through major changes. Soldiers in Nepal are guarding the parliament and patrolling deserted streets after its Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, resigned on Tuesday. Ali was the president of Nepal's Communist Party. His resignation follows clashes between anti-corruption demonstrators and police, despite an indefinite curfew which left 19 people dead.
Former Nepal Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli's home was set on fire by protesters on Tuesday after he resigned from office as anti-corruption demonstrators defied an indefinite curfew and clashed with police. It comes a day after 19 people died and at least 100 were injured trying to storm Parliament in protest of a social media ban. In his resignation letter to Nepal's president, 73-year-old Oli said he has quit to, quote, facilitate the solution to the problem and to help resolve it politically in accordance with the constitution. The unrest is the worst in decades in the poor Himalayan country, as protesters also set fire to other politicians' homes. Nepal has struggled with political instability and economic uncertainty since protests triggered the abolition of its monarchy in 2008. Organisers of the protests have called them demonstrations by Gen Z, driven by young people's widespread frustration over a perceived lack of action to tackle corruption and boost economic opportunities.
After the Communist Prime Minister's resignation, two candidates have emerged as front-runners. One is a former Chief Justice, and the other is the mayor of Nepal's capital, Kathmandu. Neither of them is a communist. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.